right, welcome back to part 2. In this part, we're going to get a little bit controversial. We'll talk about the specific parts of the 8 concepts of comprehensive sexuality education and try and see where the opposition lies and how we can come together. Okay, so I will do a quick, I did my reading from the UNESCO guidelines, which is where a lot of this reading is based from. Now, in Kenya, we had a life skills curriculum that was also based on the UNESCO guidelines. So I'll just read verbatim. So comprehensive sexuality education is a curriculum-based process of teaching and learning about the cognitive, emotional, physical, and social aspects of sexuality. It aims to equip children and young people with knowledge, skills, attitudes, and values that will empower them to realize their health, well-being, and dignity, develop respectful social and sexual relationships, consider how their choices affect their own well-being and that of others, and understand and ensure the protection of their rights throughout their lives. So CSE is education delivered in both formal and informal settings that is scientifically accurate, meaning it is factual, incremental, so that means you build up based on what they learned and move on. Age and developmentally appropriate. I'll come back to this because this seems to be such a huge issue of controversy right now. Curriculum-based, comprehensive, which is consistent rather than a one-off. So instead of just having one class where we sit and we say, today we're learning about sexual education, it's something that is ongoing from infanthood up until, you know, you're completely grown. Based on a human rights approach, this is really important. Based on gender equality, culturally relevant and context appropriate, which is also something I think that we keep missing in this conversation, and transformative. The three key domains are knowledge. It's knowledge-based, attitudinal, and it also focuses on skills building. Last part, so the key concepts are 1, relationships, 2, values, rights, culture, and sexuality. The third part is understanding gender. 4 is violence and staying safe. 5 is skills for health and well-being. 6 is the human body and development. 7 is sexuality and sexual behavior. And 8 is sexual and reproductive health. Now, these are concepts that are meant to be taught across a time period. So it's divided into 4 age groups. So from the age group of 5 to 8, then 9 to 12, then 12 to 15, and 15 to above 18. There's an overlap between the second and the third group because there's acknowledgement that children can be the same age but have different understandings, like a different ability to process things. And also it leaves space for above 18 because we also know that there are many people above 18 who are still in school, so they still need education. And then this is based on primary and secondary education, and then moving on to tertiary education, that's a different thing. So I just wanted to throw this to Charity because we've seen so much backlash from the church, so much backlash. And I will just read out a couple of things that I picked up from conferences. So these conferences were conferences I saw by the Catholic bishops. I also saw some by, I think, the Muslim Society, all over, and just interviews with pastors. So they said that it normalizes sex in children, it encourages abortion, it encourages use of contraception, it encourages rape, incest, and underage sex. We shouldn't talk about sex with children because it's not our culture. It's an African stroke, it's against our culture, and it's unchristian. I will be very transparent and say that I disagree with every single one of this, but I really want to understand where this is coming from, because this is largely what I've seen from religious leaders. And as somebody who is a religious leader, I just wanted to have a conversation and understand where the opposition comes from.
I'd say when I was going through the UNESCO curriculum and the aims that it has to eliminate teenage pregnancy, to lower the prevalence of STIs and HIV and stuff like that. And that's the response now coming up with the CSE. But from what I gather so far, and the way they say it's an age appropriate way of teaching the sexuality education. I'm wondering what a 0 years to 4-year-old has to do with how to express their sexual feelings. It's already, 0 to 4 years, even when we are teaching in Sunday school, we really have to break down the Bible to very manageable pieces, because according to their mental development, they are not developed to a point where they can make decisions for themselves. They are at a point where the information they can process it really needs to be in very small pieces. And the other aspect about children, okay, basically children between 0 to it's an age appropriate. Education is really age appropriate. It has to be presented to the level of their ability to comprehend information. So in terms of CSE brings a lot of exposure. The curriculum that I've gone through, basically it exposes them to definitions of sexuality, that including oral and anal sex, masturbation. There's an aspect of the children they receive information and they take it wholesome. They don't have the ability to question. So when you start talking about my rights, yes, they have rights. There's a way of presenting rights to children. There's the other side of it. There's two sides of the coin. Where now, when we talk about exposing children to issues of contraception, why would we be presenting children with information concerning matters that are beyond? They are not even under 18s. We consider them, they don't even, in Kenya, let's say in Kenya, under 18s shouldn't have an ID, and under 18s shouldn't drive a car. So why should we be giving them already information that needs to be processed by an adult mind, and now we are giving it to them? Have they developed the capacity where they can process that information and make responsible decisions for themselves? That's our biggest problem. We don't have a problem with educating children, and I would say to Florence on that aspect of the church had saying no to the curriculum. I think we failed in the point that we rejected this, but we didn't give an alternative, because that leaves a vacuum. Children need the information. They need to get the right information. So I would say that was a mistake on our part, where we trashed this, but we didn't provide an alternative way of educating children. I would speak for myself and what we are doing in our church. We are teaching children about their bodies. We are teaching them about their private parts. We are teaching them about protecting their private parts. We are teaching them about how they should not allow anyone who is not their parent, their guardian. They shouldn't allow anyone to touch them. And we're teaching this, like last week I was teaching a class, now school has moved to Zoom. So I was doing a Bible club with children between PP1 and grade 3. And I was teaching them about how these are my private parts. No one should touch them. No one should squeeze them. No one should kiss them. And if anyone does that, I should report it to my parent or someone I respect, someone who can intervene in that. So that So I would say for the church, we made a mistake, and I apologize on behalf of the church, because we should have offered an alternative rather than just leaving a vacuum, because children they are still growing up, and we are saying they are looking for information. So if we are not the ones providing information they can trust, then they will look for it elsewhere and they will get wrong information. They'll end up in teenage pregnancies, as we are seeing. They'll end up with making decisions that are not right for them. So my and then my other issue with the sexuality education is that we are what is it? Taking an aspect of sexuality and isolating it from other issues of their lives, in the sense that when teenagers are going into sexual behavior, what are they looking for? Because what I was reading from the CSE, we are trying to prevent teenage pregnancies and the repercussions of that. But that is like trying to, I'll borrow someone who said that when you see your dashboard lights are on and off, and you take a knife and try to destroy the bulb so that it doesn't give those signals, you have not solved the problem. And I think that's what we are doing with CSE. We are trying to eliminate teenage pregnancies. Have we dealt with the underlying issues? What are teenagers looking for? They're looking for healthy relationships. They're looking for acceptance. They're looking for love. They're looking for their identity. They're looking for meaning in their lives. But now, when we go ahead to show them that you can have sex and not have to deal with the consequences of pregnancy and all that, by promoting abortion, by promoting all these other things, contraception, you've not really helped them. You've not dealt with what they're really seeking. They're seeking more than just the sex. They're seeking so much more. And I'd put you guys to task, and and okay, I'll ask you to put me to task, because this is something I've been thinking about, and I think the church needs to provide an alternative curriculum. So if you guys can keep me accountable, I would really appreciate it. That Sema, you don't want this, what do you want? What is the alternative? Yeah, so that's what I would say.
Okay, thank you. That's quite extensive. So I guess my question goes to Gachau, since you have, Pastor said, mentioned about children between the age of 0 to 4 years. You have a child who falls in that category. What would you like them to know? And also, what would you like them to not know?
I think, first, that's a very good question. I've never thought about it in that sense, because I would call it's part of parenting. It's just recently that my daughter started going out to play, and in downstairs, I think she's interacting with both boys and girls. And she used to, just to give you an example, she needs to run upstairs to susu, as she says. And before, we had our house help who wanted her to do it outside there. Just go behind the car, do it, and come back. And my wife taught me that it's good that she learns not to be exposed in that way. And I have seen it personally. Even when we take a bath with her, when she was a bit young, anyone could walk in, and I could send an older person, maybe 10-year-old. We have my sister-in-law is 10-year-old, so I could send her to bring in the towel. And nowadays, my daughter is not okay with it. She's not okay with it in anyone coming when she's taking a shower. And so I have slowly seen that she is starting to appreciate shame. she does not want to be seen in certain ways. And I think for me, what I have learned as a parent now is to safeguard. She wants her body to be seen in a certain way and not in other ways. And therefore, for me, comprehensive sexuality education for a 2-year-old would mean that no one should touch you at certain areas, no one should touch you here. And if it happens, you should either tell me or tell mom or tell our house help. So in a nutshell, that is what I think for a 2-year-old comprehensive sexuality education would look like for now.
Okay, thank you.
Can I just jump in to that?
Yeah, sure.
What Gachau mentioned, and so in addition to it not just being about you can't touch me here. So I think for me, what it says, it speaks to the broader issue of consent. That even a 2-year-old needs to be able to consent to their body. That and that's why I completely I was thrown off a bit, because when you say what does a 0 to 4-year-old need, and I think growing up, and I'm taking it because when we grew up, it was almost as if any elder person has the right to see you or to your body,
To touch
even
you,
a doctor,
to hug you,
even a doctor,
yeah.
even to hug you. Like even sometimes you might not want to hug a certain uncle or auntie, but you're forced, you're told, go and do it. And you see, it's that sort of mindset where we're growing up thinking that you can never say no. In fact, you are told saying no is rude. You're being rude. You need to always be polite. And so for me, and I think I even learned that where even going to a hospital, a doctor does not have the right for a 3-year-old, before a doctor does anything, that child has the right to know that the doctor is supposed to ask, am I allowed to examine you, and be able to grow up knowing these are the sort of this is what needs to be happening. These are the attitudes around consent and issues like that. So I think for me, and as Pastor was saying, this idea that the idea of we're exposing them too early, I completely don't agree with that, because when you're seeing 10-year-olds being raped, when you're seeing these 9-year-olds who are already pregnant, which means they're already engaging in sex, it's not, the exposure is already there. And like you rightly said, we're living in a day, for me, sort of, I almost see the opposition towards CSE, it's almost a reluctance to embrace that we're in changing times. The context has changed. What our children know now is much different from what we knew when we were their age at that time. And by refusing to and denying to embrace that, the realities that young people are facing right now, you're denying them like very crucial information that they actually need to be able to address the challenges that they go through every single day. So even to answer that idea of exposure, and that's why the aspect of age and developmentally appropriate comes in, because we understand that as you grow up, the capacity to understand evolves, and it keeps evolving. But even taking that into account, there's now the aspect of it needs to be context specific. A child who is in Kibera, a 10-year-old, versus a 10-year-old in Kitusuru or even in South Sea, their contexts are very different. And in terms of their understanding of what sex is very different. And you also need to be able to adapt it to that, because maybe the child in Kibera might be more exposed. If, for example, I've seen where they live in a house where the parents' bedroom and their bedroom is just divided by a curtain, and they might be, since there's no safe space or there's no confidentiality per se, if the parents are having sex, the child is exposed to that. And also because you're living in a community whereby you're already economically disadvantaged, you find that most young girls might end up having to do transactional sex in order to just get the basics. And sometimes even parents push those young girls to be able to do it. So you see, the context of that 10-year-old is much different from the context of a 10-year-old who is in school, being driven by the school bus and etc. So I think exposure depends as well, is necessary, and it also needs to be context specific, which is something that we often don't really consider.
Allow me to add. Sorry, let me interrupt. You asked that what would I want my daughter to learn? And
yes, what wouldn't you want your daughter to learn at between 0 to 4 years? Yeah.
To support Charity on that. We are in a time when my daughter has to leave our bedroom for obvious reasons. Meggie has mentioned. And therefore, even when they are 0 to 4, we should not as well expose them to any form of sexual, I don't know how to call it now. They shouldn't see everything just because that one day it is going there. I mean, so that is one thing I would not like my daughter to know now. So she is in an age when she has to leave our bedroom now. So okay. I support that.
I think the one thing that I really need to highlight, which I've seen, has been my biggest problem with religious leaders, I feel like there's so much misinformation, because age appropriate actually means that at 4 years old, we do not want children to know what exactly sex is. They don't even have the capacity to take it in. And what's being put in the media is that, you know, when if you accept CSE, yeah, your child at 2 will just know exactly what to do. And it seems to me like that misinformation a lot of times is coming from the church, and that's a problem that I have. The other issue I have on contraception, I said this last week, I feel like a lot of times when, especially religious people, I say this as somebody who is also religious, when we oppose things from our privilege point of view. So, for example, you, Pastor Charity, say you're talking to children over Zoom. A child in Kibera doesn't have Zoom. A child in Madari doesn't have Zoom. A child in Kangari, they don't have Zoom. They don't. And so denying a standardized curriculum is what exactly Titus was saying. It makes the poor poorer and the rich richer. It heightens that inequality. The other thing is with teenage pregnancies and contraception, I think ideally we don't want children to be involved in sex, but we also know that children are involved in sex at the age of 8. I think it's burying our heads in the sand to say we're not going to talk about contraception. We're not going to provide contraception because they are having sex. And nobody is going to bring the contraception and say, okay, you at 14, let's insert this IUD, let's give you this. But just knowing that it's there. Because the truth is, like Meggie said, and as I'm sure Titus will also tell us, a lot of children, a lot of girls from low socioeconomic status have to take up transactional sex. They can't buy sanitary towels, so they have to have sex with somebody. We've seen stories on news about girls who are forced to sleep with boda drivers because that's how they will get money for food, or they will get money for something. So for me, it almost seems like we're not only punishing you for being poor, but we're punishing you for these options that you have that were bad in the first place. So we will not teach you, but we will also not give you contraception, despite the fact that this situation that you're in is a systemic issue that we have also refused to address. And that's my biggest problem with it, is that a lot of times we oppose things thinking, I don't want my children to learn, I teach my children. But not everybody does that, and not everybody can do that. I will hand this over to Florence to tell us more about life skills.
So I just wanted to respond to Charity. When we talk about comprehensive sex education, the conversations that go on in life skills start actually at Form 3. And I wish they could start earlier. So they're starting at Form 3. So there's no 0 to 4-year-old being taught anything. I know my grade 5 son, who is 10 years old, is learning about HIV. They're learning ways of how transmission of HIV occurs. So when they get to the point of it is sexually transmitted, how else do I explain that to him? He's 10. How do I not explain that to him? What sexual transmission is? So we are learning HIV, but we don't want to learn about the sexual transmission. So as we are saying, they should not be told. They're actually learning about HIV, and they're actually learning about HIV transmission. It is in the curriculum. So I don't know where the church will go when it comes to that, because my 10-year-old in class, they are learning about what HIV is, transmission of HIV is, beyond needles and everything else, there's sexual transmission. So they learn that. So will I not tell him the other ways of how do people then prevent themselves from HIV? All those things I'll say. Another thing, so there's, like I wanted to say, 0 to 4 are not being told that. So the church is not informed in terms of, by doing a blanket statement on comprehensive sex education, by saying that it's 0 to 4-year-olds, we are ignoring the bigger picture. It's only from Form 3, and I wish it was from Standard 6 or even 5 when they start doing HIV, so they start understanding these issues. Number 2, how do I talk, like, the question that you asked Patrick about 0 to 4, or how do you tell a young child? My son, when he was two, he asked me why I talked to him about his body parts when we were doing head, shoulder, knees, and toes. We even said, we talked about breasts, we talked about penis, we talked about all those things. So he knew what the body parts are called. Did it teach him to have sex? No, but he knew the body parts. I was not going to call anything a doo-doo, because when an insect pass by, I will also say it's a doo-doo. So why the hell should I call that a doo-doo? Number 2, when my youngest was born, they were like 3 years apart. So when he was 3 and this other one is 1 and he's walking around, there's a day they wanted to shower, and so their father told them to remove clothes, he's going to wash them. Because at a certain age, I don't wash my boys. Ikifika mahali fulani, 6 months, the father takes over. So I'm lucky like that. Anyway, so when one day, so this 3-year-old is 3.5, is ametoa nguo, kakadogo kamesaidiwa, kametoa nguo, kanajua kutembea. So the small one looks at the brother and sees there's something hanging. And then he goes to touch. And I had told my son when he was 2 that nobody, not even me, not even the doctor, touches you, not even dad, unless you're sick. And if you're sick, we will go to hospital. And if we're in hospital, I'll be standing right there if the doctor has to touch. Now, when his brother was 1, he remembered the lesson that he learned when he was 2. When the brother tried to touch, I had taught him, when somebody tries, you scream and you bite the hand, because I figured if you're an adult, you'll be down there, so you should be able to bite you. Anyway, so I was downstairs when all this thing was happening. So I quickly ran when he screamed, "Mommy!" And he called his brother and he said, "He's trying to touch my penis." I ran upstairs, and I was going upstairs and shouting, "Please do not bite." Why? Because he had remembered that lesson from when he was 2. So yes, we have to talk to our children. Why? Because there are people out there who are not as good as we are as parents. There are people out there who will take advantage of our children. And if we refuse to talk about these things, we are allowing the perpetrators to have a field day with our children. Whether they are our neighbors, whether they are our own children in Sunday school, we even see that in churches. People abducting children within church. And that's why churches have done stringent measures of picking children from Sunday school. So the church is misinformed about life skills. It starts from Form 3. Unfortunately, it should start earlier. And Titus will tell you, when you go to this disadvantage, even into the villages, because I've spoken to children in the villages. There's a card here I lifted because I really wanted you guys to see. I don't know whether you can see it. Can you be able to read it, or I read it for you? So it's
just
saying,
move it closer, but also read
wazazi
it.
wanapenda kusema tujitafutie. Yes, wanapenda kusema tujitafutie pesa ya pads tukishaanza periods. Wanamaanisha nini na kujitafutia? This is a 12-year-old. So if, pastor, you are in Sunday school with this 12-year-old, uko home ameambiwa ajitafutie pesa ya period. Huku, you're telling her something else. Our children are not on the same level. And if we do not we end up being those people who are me, myself, and I as a church, forgetting there are other very poor within our community that need us more. That they do not need judgment. They need us to help. And so if we don't take that route, we are going to lose a whole generation. We are going to get to a place whereby we have children who don't have information. And it doesn't mean that if I tell my child this is a poison, they'll drink it. I will tell them this is a poison. These are the consequences of the poison. Yes, he might decide to drink. And unfortunately, he'll find out the consequences in the wrong way. But if I don't tell him there is poison, he might take it and the blame will be on me, that I never informed my child. It's the same thing with contraceptives plus all the other information. I have young girls who get married in church, and the only time they learn about contraceptives is after they've gotten married and they're having 2-3 children, and they're wondering, how do I stop these pregnancies? Because I really need to go back to school. I need to keep my career, all those things. We need to give people information. We should also trust that our children are intelligent enough, they're obedient enough to hear what we say. But we also know there are children who will decide to go their own way, irrespective of what you say or do. So we cannot deny information just because we think we are worried as adults. This is what they'll do with it.
I think just to add on to, I fully agree with what Florence has said. When I was preparing for this, I was scrolling through, I spent a lot of time on Twitter, but Dr. Chambogo, she's a lady I really like, but she was saying denying people comprehensive sexuality education, if you can equate it to financial education. So for example, when you have financial education, you're taught these are good investments, these are bad investments, this is what to do, this is what not to do, these are the options you have, this is how to protect yourself. It doesn't tell you go spend your money. It tells you ways that you can use your money, but it doesn't, and proper ways and bad ways as well. It doesn't tell you here is money, go spend it and buy whatever. So for me, if you look at comprehensive sexual education that way, then it's the same thing. It's being able to tell children to let them make informed choices. And like Florence said, yes, some of them will make bad choices, irrespective. But it would be an injustice to deny that information on the basis that a few of them will make bad choices. And also, interestingly, studies have shown that countries that embrace comprehensive sexual education actually end up having delayed sexual initiation and less pregnancies, less STIs. So I think it's to our advantage to actually look at it. I want to move to Titus because he has a very unique place, especially with dealing with people from disadvantaged places.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Cynthia. So I'll just start from the document you sent me about the APHRC survey 2015,
yeah,
which says 26% of 15 to 17-year-olds are having sex. That's 2015. 5 years later, with social media, with COVID and all this, I believe the number have surged. So basically what I'm trying to say is that we are burying our heads in the sand. The church is the biggest perpetrator of that, followed by the government. And what I'm saying is that we need to put the child at the center. 0 to 4, there are some hugs. There's a way you touch a child of 0 to 4. It's not the same way you touch a kid who is older, you know? So these kids need to know what is the right touch, what is the right hug, how do you respond to these issues? And when you do that, you also need to do research. You need to do data. And some of these teachers, like Charity, I don't want to judge you, but you might be an expert in religion. In religion, you understand the Bible, but some aspects of sexuality you don't understand. And you have to be humble enough and say, I don't understand this. Let's work with an expert. Let's follow the expert. I don't understand the need of creating an alternative story, because once you have an alternative story, it might be designed in a way to mislead people. I don't want to blame the church solely, but what I'm saying is that let's put the child at the center. What do they need? When we started our program that is called Adole Church, we took ourselves back when we were 12, 13, 11, 12, 13. What would we have liked to learn when we were that age? What were we telling each other, pretending to be experts? You know, Cynthia, you mentioned about showering after sex, standing up when you're having sex. We used to tell each other those stories, and still people got pregnant. So that's why we have that slogan of demystifying myths, because we chose topics that we thought were very important at that point in time. But also, ours is not just a sexuality program. We also have life skills in terms of leadership and also financial literacy. So it's a whole year program whereby the first time we talk about sexuality, second time we talk about leadership, the third time we talk about financial literacy, setting goals and these kind of things. Because now we believe that we have a whole experience, and these kids understand, because of the economy, you find that it's getting raped because they are putting themselves in some situation. So what we are trying to do is that we want to be experts. We are constantly training our facilitators. They're young people, they just finished university and all these things. We are trying to train them to be expert. Every time we're improving on our curriculum. It's not the best, but we are trying to improve on our curriculum. So for example, when we started, prep was not there, you know, but we included it into our other programs that were coming up, because it's a new technology, it's a new information that many people did not have. But what we see with the education that Florence is talking about it's more like biology. It's not updated even after 10 years. The same information we got in primary school, you realize the same. And things are changing. What is social media? What is the part that social media can play? How can we infuse that kind of information? And also someone talked about context. I think it's Meggie. It's also very important to understand context. 5 years ago is not the same as now. 10 years ago is not the same as now. There are so many things happening. So just to say that we cannot blame one single person. We need everyone to play a part, but we also need to have data and expertise to make sure that the kids get the right information. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the most, sorry, this really seems like an attack against the church. And maybe to some extent it is, because I've really honestly seen the most ridiculous stuff out there. And one of the things that I think was really shocking to me was seeing a female pastor saying that if we have comprehensive sexual education, that we are telling 10-year-olds that they can go and have sex and they cannot have consequences. And it is disturbing to me that we feel that we have to enforce consequences on 10-year-olds who in the first place cannot consent to sex. It's disturbing to me that is the tone that the church takes, when a lot of times these children have no say in what is happening to them. Because even at 10, even if, you know, people say, oh, she was mature at 13, at 16, at 17, at 18, you cannot consent to it. So it's just been, I think for me, it's just been a bit strange reading that and seeing that on the news and seeing that being highlighted. I said this last week and I'll say it also in this one. I think another thing that's also been really shocking for me, I'm happy we have a female clergy member. I'm actually really happy we have that. Because it's been a bit strange to me seeing just these 60-year-old men opposing all the time. They oppose the reproductive health bill. They oppose comprehensive sexuality education. But they do nothing to give us alternatives. It is not the lives of those 60-year-old men who that is affected. they can very easily just say no and go ahead and continue their lives perfectly well and not even think twice about it. But when you deny a girl who is 16 and has to have sex with a Buddha driver, when you deny her education, when you deny her, access to contraception, you're ruining that girl's life and you're perpetuating a cycle of poverty. So for me, that's been, I think, just such a huge problem. I think we can move on to final thoughts.